What is up, everybody? My name is Justin. This is Forever Self-Employed, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about parking lot striping equipment. We're going to be giving you guys a complete guide, everything you're going to need to know in order to get started with your parking lot striping business, take it up to an intermediate level, and then ultimately graduate to pro, which is what my guest is. Chris, how's it going, man?
It's going good, Justin. How is it?
It's going good, man. We're glad you could join me. We've been wanting to do this for a little while. We want to lay out everything for you guys. So every piece of equipment that you're going to need along the way in order to progress within your parking lot striping business, as well as I want to give you guys some price ranges for each equipment group. Now, there are particular pieces to the equipment that are more expensive than other pieces, and we'll get into that here in just a minute. But it could be a little bit confusing and a little daunting whenever you have so many options for starting your parking lot striping business. And that's why we brought in a professional who is Chris. Now, before we get into this one, I do want to share with you guys a couple things. First and foremost, me and Chris built out the How to Stripe course, mainly Chris because he's a striping professional. But the course goes through everything you need to know in order to launch your striping business and make it as successful as possible. Pro tips. We have a ton of 8 hours of training. We've got on-site stuff. We've got property protection and safety, new layout stuff, how to price the job, lead generation, along with just everything else that you're going to need in order to get started with your parking lot striping journey. So if you guys are interested in that, be sure to check out the first link in the comment section description. The second link, though, is going to be to in-person training. So if you're somebody who's been thinking about getting started in parking lot striping, but you're not sure, if it's right for you, then we have a link down below. Chris is doing some in-person training. You can fill out the form, and we'll get in contact with you if, you're somebody that can do some in-person training or somebody who's interested in that kind of thing. Because one of the biggest things is, Chris, and I want you to weigh in on this as well, is it's a little daunting to get started, especially when you don't know how to operate a machine. You don't know ADA regulations. You don't know how to price a service. So kind of speak to what it's like to come in person and train with you and how that can be beneficial for anybody out there who's interested in starting in this business.
Yeah, it could be very beneficial. Matter of fact, earlier this week, Monday and Tuesday, we had a guy that gave us a call last week, asked if he can come up Monday and Tuesday for some in-person training. He came up. We did practice, how to price jobs, estimating, market assessment. It was a really good experience for him. He went from practicing in field to the last day of training. We just threw him on a job. He made a lot of mistakes, messed up a lot, but it was okay. We were there with him, and we were able to guide him every step of the way. But when he left, he was very confident that he was going to be able to start and scale his own business. And I'm excited. I believe he's going to be a major player down in Texas, where he came from, in the next few months.
Absolutely. That's one of the things about the parking lot striping industry. I don't think it's really evolved too much. It's really been like a large barrier to get into the industry. And I think, the players that have been in it for a while kind of have a monopoly a little bit, if you will. And it's open for new people to step in. As you know, Chris got started, and he absolutely dominated within his first couple of years of doing this. So if you guys do want to learn from Chris, be sure to check out the second link in the comment section description. That is going to be to the in-person training. Also, if you can't make it in person, then you can check out the How to Stripe course, which is also great. So Chris, with all that being said, let's go ahead and jump to the topic of today's video, and that is the equipment guide, right? So let's start off with beginner equipment. I know me and you have made a couple different videos on this, but for anybody who doesn't know, a couple of the most important pieces that you're going to need is like rollers, brushes, tapes, things of that nature. In the beginning of your business, Chris, can we kind of talk about it being okay to do hand striping first, and then, kind of when you're ready, you can move into having a machine. Can you kind of speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, 100%. There is a common misconception when it comes to entering into this industry, that if you don't have $20K to drop on some equipment, that you're not going to be successful. And that is further from the truth as possible, because I know guys that reach out to me all the time who are entertaining the idea or wanting to get started, that might not have $20K to go drop on a rig, that might not even have a couple thousand even to get into that intermediate barrier, right? I've heard of guys landing their first job from the stuff that we teach in the How to Stripe course. They've landed their first job, went out, performed the job with tape and rollers with paint, and they landed like 5K. So it's possible. It's possible for guys to take what is taught, implement it out in the field, and land big jobs, even if you don't have a machine. And then once you get to that point, you can always rent a machine for a day. And we might be able to talk about a little bit of that later on.
Absolutely, absolutely. Actually, but for our wash business, our first job that we ever did parking lot striping, it was a hand rolled. We taped the lines, and I think we made close to $1,000 on that job. Like it's a great upsell for pressure washing. It's a great upsell in general, just because it needs to be done, and there's not a lot of service providers offering it. And so typically these businesses will have to Google and look for these services to be done by professionals. So if you're one of these people that are hungry and want to get out there and really make it happen for yourself, check out the How to Stripe course. In there, Chris kind of shows how to get around the gatekeepers and really get to those decision makers before they look at their parking lot and go, "Hey, we need to get this done." That way you have a leg up on the competition. So that's one of the beautiful pieces. I love that you said, Chris, that you can get started. Typically people have this mindset of I need 20K in order to get started, and it's kind of a barrier to entry for them. But as you mentioned before, we don't need that. So let's kind of go through the gamut on everything that we're going to need. I'm going to share a screen here, and we're going to take a look at Sherwin-Williams. Chris, like, one of your favorite places to do business and to get started with business is at Sherwin-Williams. Isn't this where you buy all your paint, right?
This is where we buy a lot of our paint. Recently, we've been experimenting with a different manufacturer, but for the most part, this is where we get all of our paint and our supplies. And they have a large selection and a variety to pick from, whether you're looking at paint, tape, rollers, whatever the case may be. The reps are very helpful as well. So, but yeah, that's a good place to start at Sherwin-Williams.
Okay, perfect. So we'll go into tape first. Is there any specific type of tape that you like, Chris? Like, any one of these that you go with?
Yeah, all of them are good, but I mean, you've seen at the very, very top, that tape right there in the top row in the very middle. It's not fancy tape. I mean, we use that all the time, and there could be a price range, right? You could get tape that is this tape is obviously half the price of some other tape that's there. And obviously, if you're wanting to get started in the business and you don't have a lot of money to invest in up front, this tape right here is going to be more than sufficient to be able to tape off the lines, tape the areas, blue boxes, and all that stuff. So yeah, I would definitely start with this tape right here.
Absolutely. For anybody who missed it, me and Chris actually did an entire video where we walked into Sherwin-Williams and talked about how you guys could start a parking lot striping business for absolutely free. And one of the things that you could do is open up an account with them. And Chris, do you want to talk a little bit about that? The things we talked about in that video with regards to starting a business for free in Sherwin-Williams?
Sure. Yeah. It's very important. First things first is whenever you go to open up a contractor's account, guys, you got to have good credit. You're not going to be able to go in there with a 320 credit score, try to open up a contractor's account, because it's not going to work. Now, if you have good credit, what that's going to do is allow you to essentially start this business with no upfront cost, right? For example, if you start your contractor's account, let's say you don't have any money, but then you can turn around and go sell a job. Let's say that you have no money in the bank, but you start your contractor's account with Sherwin-Williams. Then what you can do is go find your first job, right? Sell the job, depending upon whether it's a big job, little job, whatever the case may be. You have your contractor's account open, you sell the job. Once you get that first confirmed yes through the CRM, and we can talk a little bit about that later, but once you get your first confirmed yes through your CRM, then what you can do, say, for example, that job is $1,500, going to cost you $200 in supplies to get it done. You go over to Sherwin-Williams, and then you go to your charge account, get whatever supplies it is that you need to do the job, charge the account. You can leave Sherwin-Williams with your supplies, do the job, the customer pays you, and then you can pay off your contractor's account. And you've essentially started this for free. I mean, what other business models are there where you can essentially start with a startup cost of $0? I don't know any.
Right. Maybe like picking weeds at somebody's house. I'm not sure.
Right.
But anyway, okay, so we kind of covered tape a little bit. Let's get into rollers now. Obviously, if you guys are going to be doing some hand-rolled striping, you're going to need a roller. Chris, any particular roller? Like, what should the size be? You know what I mean?
Sure. I would definitely start with a 4-inch roller if you're going to mask off your lines. And then that would be for the lines, like right there at the very last row all the way to your right. That's a roller that we use. That's a good roller for your lines, the frame. And then you can get the actual roller that goes on the frame. I would use that for example, for a 4-inch line. And then if I'm going to be doing blackout stenciling or handicap box stenciling, then I would get an 8-inch roller, because you want to cover as much paint as you can. For example, with the 8-inch rollers, we're doing a bunch of Scooters Coffees right now. And since we don't have the exact stencils that are matching with their drive-through and do not enters, what we've been doing is just taking those 8-inch rollers and then taping off the edges and then painting it with a black box and then re-stenciling it. And we're doing that with a roller. And I'm sending drone pictures up in the air, and my customers love it. They love the black box stenciling with the drone pictures. And they don't know that I did that with a roller, but I did it with a roller, and then spray the stenciling, of course. But you're not going to be limited just because you're using a roller. So don't let that stop you if you've been thinking about getting into the business.
Absolutely. So, okay, sweet. So we talked a little about rollers. We talked about some tape. Let's get into brushes now. I mean, obviously it's good to have brushes for a couple different reasons. You know, we've done the wheel stops, trying to get the bases. It's good to have a brush. Any particular brush that you would go with, Chris? I mean, I guess just any kind of old paintbrush would work.
Yeah, any old paintbrush could work, especially with like touch-ups. I mean, once you have your rollers, essentially that's what you're going to need. But say, for example, you mess up or there's just a small area and you just want some touch-ups, I would definitely use brushes for sure. Nothing in specific, but I would definitely get at least one on the bigger side and then another one on the smaller side. The top row right there is perfectly sufficient. And then middle of the middle brush of the second line would be good too. So get a medium-sized brush, small-sized brush for touch-ups.
Okay, excellent. And if you guys have been seeing the prices on all this stuff, it's very, very cheap in order to get started. Like it's practically, I don't want to say nothing, but $100 bill would probably get you most of the things on this list. Let's get into paint, Chris. We talked about rollers, brushes, tape. Obviously, paint is incredibly important. You'd mentioned that you get your paint from Sherwin-Williams. Is there anything for us to take into consideration with regards to traffic paint whenever we're striping in this way of rolling it out?
Sure. Yeah, that's a very good question. Very common question. What happens is with traffic paint, there are several different paints to choose from. It's important that you utilize the right type of paint for the application, whether it be your weather, what kind of materials you're spraying on, and the method by which the specifications state that you should. All that comes into play, and it's very, very important. And that's one of the things that we talk about in the How to Stripe course, the understanding various types of paints. That way, whenever you get finished, you have a good understanding of solvent-borne paints or waterborne paints, the temperature to spray them, what pressure to use, what tip to use. I mean, all these factors are very important, and we've included that in that training. That way, whenever you get done, you will have a better understanding of traffic paint. Now, specifically, if you're starting off with tape and rollers, which is fine, you're going to need to use a waterborne or latex paint. You're going to have to use that because the solvent-borne paint, you're not going to be able to roll that effectively, especially if you're striping large jobs. So I would start off with a waterborne paint.
Okay, excellent. Waterborne paint. Okay, sweet. Paint is one of those things that you wouldn't think would be very tricky, but when it comes down to parking lot striping, in a lot of instances, it can be very tricky. So let me see if I can find the water. Yeah, here we go. Pro Park waterborne traffic paint. And as Chris mentioned, if you get an account with them, then you can easily go and get this, and you can put it on your account and actually pay for it after the job, which is incredibly beneficial. So water paint, if you're going to be hand rolling, and then Chris, like, we can kind of hop over here and let's take a look at the striping machines. So let's kind of talk about the first striper that you get, right? Because this is kind of a big thing in where the price point is going to land. Now, a company sent me my first striper, and what they sent me was a field striper. I think it was no, it wasn't a Graco. It was a field laser though, right?
Right. It was a Titan 850.
Titan 850. Okay, that's not going to be on here. But Chris, can you talk a little bit about that beginner striper? If we wanted to get started in the business, which one we can kind of go with?
Yeah, I mean, there are several different options to choose from. You can start off with a 4250 airless striper. You could start off with a Titan 850, or you can start off with a Graco S100 airless field marker. The difficult thing about it is let's just take the 850 for example. you're going to be limited. So with your Titan 850s, you're not going to be able to use solvent-borne paint. You're only going to be able to use waterborne paint. I would keep that into consideration because you're going to be limited, especially whenever you get into colder temperatures. Now, but don't let that stop you, because I've got a friend who got a Titan 850 and ran 100K his first year. If you haven't seen that video about parking lot striping machines on my channel, go watch that video. It talks about the Titan 850, where I have done product reviews on various types of parking lot striping machines. If you go watch that video, I break down the pros and the cons about the Titan 850, and that's a good starter machine. I mean, ideally, it's not something that you want to stay with, but if you need something quick and you can only afford, $3,000 for a machine, then the Titan 850 or the Graco Field Laser is probably the way that I would go, or the 4250 for sure.
Okay, excellent. For anybody who hasn't checked out Chris's channel, be sure to check it out. Try to leave it linked, but it's Chris the Striping Guy, like the best content on the internet with regards to parking lot striping. Like he mentioned, he's actually got reviews of different machines on here as well. Chris, you had kind of mentioned and you might have said it and I just missed it, so I'm going to re-ask it. You had kind of mentioned about the paint. Can you talk a little bit about the difference in paint that this one uses? Because I know sometimes that we've had issues in the past with regards to the paint being too thick and not spraying properly, or we'll get clogs in it, right? Isn't that what you're kind of alluding to earlier?
Yes. So you would never, under any circumstance, for example, want to mix two different types of paint. Let's say that you've loaded up your water machine and you loaded up your solvent machine, and then you run out of solvent paint, but then you got a little bit of water paint that's in the same color. Ideally, you would never mix that paint together in that machine, right? So you would never mix solvent paint with waterborne paint. And that's how it is with your machines. You can do it, but it has to be filtered properly. And all those things we teach within the How to Stripe course, how to filter the machine, how to clean them, all that, so on and so forth. But yeah, you need to have a good understanding of the specification requirements that your machines are designed with. Because if you don't have a good understanding of your machines or your traffic paint or what type of spray tips to use, if you don't have a good understanding about that, then you will get clogs. So, for example, in this video, you're looking at the Titan 850, and say, for example, your paint's a little bit clumpy. Well, with waterborne paint, you could just add a little bit of water into it, 1/4 of a cup of water, and then you can mix it up with your drill, put it on recirculate, let it go through the machine a little bit, thin it down just a tad bit, because when you thin it down, it's going to be a little bit easier on the pump, especially with smaller machines.
Okay, excellent. Great advice, Chris. Just because I don't know, sometimes we'll have issues. And when you get that thick paint in there and it messes, and it clogs up, it splatters all over the place and it's just not a good look. So that's one of the benefits of using some of these higher end machines that we're going to get to here in just a little bit. But as far as beginner equipment, right? We covered rollers, brushes, tapes, paint, striping machines. The last one is stencils. So I'm going to go ahead and hop over into the stencils in here, Chris. And then I kind of want you to break down for us, though, what stencils can we tape off and what stencils do we absolutely need with the beginner setup?
Sure. You at least need 3 stencils. Okay. You need a directional arrow, you need a fire lane stencil, and you need a handicap stencil. Now, depending upon your local regulations will determine the size of the stencil that you need, but you at least need a handicap stencil, a fire lane stencil, and a directional arrow stencil. Now, as you graduate from doing restripes into new construction, depending upon where it is that you're servicing, whether it be a particular fast food chain, they all have their individual stencils. Okay, so you have to custom order those. As you guys graduate from beginner to intermediate to advanced, all you need to do is start with 3 stencils, and you should be able to get all 3 of those stencils for under $100.
Okay, boom. And let's take a look at them actually. So you'd said fire lane? No. This is the fire lane, right?
Fire lane, yeah, yes, or fire lane, no parking, depending upon the type of material too. So if you get it in the best type of material, that's going to be a determining factor financially as well. But just a handicap stencil, a fire lane stencil, and then one directional arrow. And then as you graduate to new construction, or you start doing large restaurant chains like we do, then that's whenever you will kind of start ordering those custom stencils.
Chris, the funny thing about like some of these handicap stencils is like we ordered handicap stencils, but like each plate, like a lot of times we'll go to different places and they'll have different size handicap stencils. Is there one that you recommend that's kind of most uniform across all parking lots?
I recommend the 48-inch ADA stencil. That's pretty much like the standard. If you go up and scroll all the way to the right, it's the right down there with the blue box.
Oh, yep.
Right there. That's the one that I would get. I mean, you see federal handicap stencil. It should be like 48 inches or something like that. That's the stencil that you should start with. That's what I would start with, the guy with the blue background, because I mean that's the federal symbol that's recognized. Now they're trying to change it into another symbol, but as for the moment, the handicap stencil federally has not changed, and because ADA is important. I mean, this is all the stuff that we talk about in the How to Stripe course, right? Not just the stencil you need, but we also talk about how to identify fire lane code violations on restripes, access aisles, the dimensions, why it's important, what could happen if an accident does occur, how to identify signage, proper signage. All that is loaded in that training, and we specifically did it that way, that when you get done with it, you have a better understanding of fire lane, of ADA, stencils, how to stencil, so on and so forth. So it's very beneficial to know these things without a doubt.
Absolutely. And as you guys saw, that training is over 8 hours long. So it's like we could never cover all that in a live on here. And it would probably bore a lot of people because although new layout is boring, it's terribly boring, at least for me, because I don't like new layout that much. You can make a lot of money with new layout, and not knowing it, will prevent you. I think a lot of people, like, you see parking lot striping, you just figured, oh, I'm just going to go out there and restripe everything. But that's not the case, right, Chris? Like a lot of, new construction has new layout, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, you're going to be limited. I mean, when you first start, you're going to do a lot of restripes, but as you grow, you will transition into more new layout construction. I mean, I had a customer that called me the other day and told me that he puts up buildings all over the city with hundreds of lines, all new layout construction. And they were looking for a designated striping guy. Well, when you talk about new layouts and site plans, I mean, that you have to be able to read those. I mean, with new construction site plans. And that's one of the things that I love about How to Stripe, is because there is not another training out there on the market. Now there are other trainings, but it's not as in-depth, because we bring in a project manager that has managed multi-million-dollar projects, and we brought him in, and within the How to Stripe course, he actually teaches how to read those site plans, how to have a firm understanding of new construction layout. We also talk about how to lay out perpendicular parking, 45-degree angle, 60, 75-degree angle parking. That way, you not only know how to read those plans, which is one of the most challenging things as it pertains to information contained within this business, is new construction layouts, but it's how to actually do the layouts. And that is important as well.
Absolutely. So if you guys haven't already, it'll be the first link in the comment section description to check out the How to Stripe course. But as far as beginner setup, that pretty much covers everything. We talked about rollers, brushes, tape, paint, the type of paint if you're going to be hand striping, as well as a striping machine if you're just getting started, which is something like you guys saw in this video, a field striper, and as well as stencils, the three most important stencils that you're going to need in order to get started. So that would be the beginner setup. Chris, if you were to tell us, a ballpark on that, like obviously if you're hand striping, you can get all of that stuff for a couple $100. If you wanted to go ahead and get the parking lot striping machine like you guys are seeing on the screen right here, that would probably raise the price up closer to that $4,000 mark. Wouldn't you say that's about right, Chris?
Yeah, for sure. It would definitely raise it up. I mean, to get everything included, kind of with that starter machine. And so, yeah, that's for sure. Now we're talking about the next step, correct?
Well, I'm gonna segue. So, absolutely. So that was the beginner setup, right? That was all the things that you needed for the beginner setup. Let's kind of get into now what that intermediate looks like. I do want to say this first and foremost because I want to set a precedence with regards to how much you can get done. So with the beginner, intermediate, pro. Beginner is obviously hand striping. It's going to take you longer to do hand striping than it will if you got a field striper. Obviously, the difference in cost is between, going from maybe $200 to $4,000, but you're able to do full-size parking lots in a day. Now, Chris, when we move from beginner to intermediate, what does that new striping machine look like, and maybe what are the price points?
Sure. Well, when you go to upgrade, you're going to need a bigger machine as you start selling bigger jobs. Now, what happens is after people graduate from hand rolling and then they move off into the 850, the next step, what you're going to do is you're going to either get a Graco 3400 or a Titan 3500. Those are going to be the machines, or you can stick with a new stripe machine right there, the 4600. Right, there are several options there. So you have Graco, Titan, and then new stripe. Now with your Titan 3500, remember whenever we talked about how your 850 was limited to latex paint only. So with the Titan 3500, you're able to use both waterborne and you're able to use solvent-borne paint. So then you become more productive. So not only can you stripe more faster, but you also become more productive and you're able to be more versatile when it comes to the application of your paints. And having a good understanding of those machines is very important. Then you have the Graco 3400, which is what Justin is looking at now. These are more of your intermediate machines where you're growing, right? You're growing and you're able to produce more in volume. I mean, I have heard about a guy doing $1 million in revenue with just a 3400. I mean, you think about that for a second. You got one guy, one truck doing $1 million in revenue with just a Graco 3400. The possibilities are endless for people that are wanting to get into this service-based business. And with your machines, right, you have to think about that. Whereas it's taking you 4 hours to do 30 lines, now you're doing 30 lines in about 10 minutes. Right. So you're just you begin to get more work done, and then faster. You're servicing more lots in a shorter amount of time. You're making more money a lot faster. And it really is going to revolutionize the way that you do business once you graduate from hand rolling into a bigger machine, for sure.
So, Chris, the biggest advantage, though, from going from a machine like in this video, which is a field striper, to like a Graco line laser, because I mean the price difference is about $2,000, but you said that you could use different paints, right? And this was a little bit more capable.
Right. And it just depends upon where you are geographically. For example, let's say that you are in Nebraska towards November, or you're in Oklahoma towards November, right? You're in the middle of the United States towards November, the temperature starts to drop, right? Whereas if you're spraying latex paint, your temperature limitations are at 50 degrees. Some paints are at 60 degrees. Okay. Now, solvent-borne paint, if it's sprayed through one of those bigger machines, you're able to stripe in colder temperatures, right? So if you have an 850 and you can only spray latex paint, if the minimum specification requirements of the paint, which we cover all that stuff in the training, the minimum specifications, you're limited to the temperature in which you can spray the application of the paint because of the limitations of your machine. That means that if you're in the if it's November in Oklahoma and that's all you've got is an 850, you're shutting down. I mean, unless you're in Texas or somewhere south where it's warm during the winter. Whereas with these 34 and 3500s, you're able to stripe in colder temperatures because you're able to use various types of paints that are compatible with bigger machines. So the advantages are not only do you get to pump out more volume, but you get to spray more kinds of paint. You get to get more work done faster. You get to service more parking lots. You get to provide that solution to your customers, and you become more productive.
Okay, beautiful. Absolutely. And obviously, bigger price, but more productivity, more money you're going to be able to make. Chris, how do the stencils change as we kind of move into that intermediate level? I know you kind of mentioned like each restaurant chain having its own particular stencils. Obviously, we got our big three, which are mandatory from the beginning. Anything else with regards to stencils that would change from beginner to intermediate?
Yeah, it would just depend upon your scalability. I mean, you know, we do all of the Raising Canes in my state. We do all of the Waffle House. We just landed Scooters. We do Sonics. I mean, we're servicing multiple types of restaurant chains, and all of them require their own individual stencil kit. So when we landed a new chain, which was Scooters, we got Scooters last month. They just awarded us the contract, and they just gave us an entire list, and we've just been doing them whenever we can get to them. Well, they had specific stencils. Well, I was talking to them and I asked them, I said, well, I mean, I don't have these exact stencils, and instead of spending $2,000 plus to have them cut, have them shipped, let me just use this stencil kit, make them all uniformed, and then that way they're all matching. Because when you go to different parking lots, even though they might have different stencil kits, new construction management, a lot of times they just stripe. Okay, they just stripe, and there's no uniformity when it comes to the stencils. So what I did is I convinced the Scooters chain that we landed that they should just let us use all of the cane stencils. And now guess what? Whoever comes and restripes, if they don't have the cane stencils, they're going to have to cover it up. I don't think that they're going to pick anybody else. I know that they're going to go with us as far as, you know, I know they're going to go with us as far as the restripes on a reoccurring basis. But all these things, as far as your stencils, are important to keep into consideration. So not only that, but just the other day, you and I just made a video about it. What was it, yesterday? How we did the Little Caesars, you know, doing one Little Caesars franchise essentially for free, which utilizing the information that we teach within the How to Stripe course of how to bypass that gatekeeper to get in contact with the decision maker. By doing that, one Little Caesars landed us an entire office complex that we seal coated, crack filled, and striped, but we also got access to the rest of their stores, which were 37. So now we've got an entire list of properties that we're able to have access to as a result of that information. So that's the stencils that you're looking at right now that we've been putting in the Scooters coffee, and they love it. Your mic is on mute.
Very interesting, though, that each individual chain would have its own, you know, own stencil kit. But I guess it's that way they can keep everything kind of branded to the way that they want to look. Okay, Chris, so we talked about striping machines, kind of going from that beginner to intermediate. We talked about the stencils. Is there anything that changes with regards to the paint type? Well, we kind of talked about that as well. You said you can run different paints depending upon the weather. So the paint type does change going from beginner to intermediate. Can you give us a little bit of a price range, maybe when we're talking about an intermediate setup?
Yes, I can. The price range is it's going to vary. Now, if you don't have that contractor's account, I can tell you right now, you're going to pay more than double for your paint. The paint prices are going to vary based upon you having that contractor's account. I went into Sherwin-Williams the other day to pick up the tape that we were just talking about earlier in the video, and he asked me if I had a charge account, and I was like, I do, but it's no big deal. And he was like, well, it'll be cheaper if you charge it under your account. And then I was like, yeah. And then he ran the company name, and it knocked off like $3. So if you don't have a contractor's account, then you're not going to be able to get paint at half price. Essentially, if you have a contractor's account, your paint cost is cut in half. That's why it is very imperative that you have a good credit score. And I also want to highlight something, if you don't mind. People in the comment section are asking if there's going to be a Q&A section. So I just didn't know if you had that planned in the live as well. Is there going to be a Q&A session later on in the live?
Of course, if you guys have any good questions, leave them down in the comment section below. I mean, it's funny. This Lamb asked if there was a Q&A, and the only question that he asked was, "Are you a millionaire yet?" So, Lamb, we do appreciate the question, but it's really not pertinent to the discussion. So, as long as you guys have good questions, we'll answer those towards the end, if that's okay. So, if you guys want to hang out with us, we'll do Q&A at the end. Like we have Willade. She's got a good question, but we're gonna save it. So intermediate, Chris, did you put a price tag on that? Oh, you know what, like between 5 to 10 grand, would you say?
5 to 10 grand to get started. Yeah, I'd say about 5 to 10,000. And but again, when people hear that price tag, man, like they automatically associate limitations. Okay, if you do not have money to invest in the front end, this is why having good credit is so important, because whenever I first started, guys, I was working 3 jobs. I mean, I was pounding out 60 hours a week for about $1,000 in a week, working 60 hours. And I was trapped. There was no way out. I mean, I was limited. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was living paycheck to paycheck. I barely had any money to make it through. And I was having to work up to 60 hours just to provide for my family. And then when I started striping, even though I did not have a lot of money, I did have a good credit score. What I was able to do, instead of investing 10K to get started, I was able to get a loan from my credit union. So I was able to get started at a fraction of the price. And when I got that first machine, we blew up. I mean, I quit my jobs, and everything, and it changed my life financially. And that's one of the reasons why we built the training, is to help people that are out there that are living paycheck to paycheck, that are struggling, that are working 60 plus hours a week and having nothing left over at the end of the week. We wanted to make it where this is attainable for them. We want this to be achievable for every common person that's out there. So yes, there is a barrier to entry, but as long as you're responsible and you have a good credit score, then this is very well achievable, and it can be done in a short period of time.
Right. The biggest thing that I wanted to say with regards to the intermediate pricing, yeah, 5 to 10 grand, but you got to look at the amount of jobs that you can get done, right, Chris? Like you'd be able to make thousands of dollars a day with with that intermediate level striping machine. Just like you said, that guy made $1 million. So it's like, okay, imagine $5,000 or $10,000 is needed to get to that intermediate equipment range. You can make $1 million with it. Like, you know what I mean? Would you trade me 5,000 for $1 million? You know what I mean?
That's right. That's right. And this right here too, and I'm opening my app, and I just want to show you this. Like when I was working that many hours a week, and I was grinding through it, right? I never thought in my life that I would be seeing the numbers that I'm seeing coming across my screen. I mean, Lamb was asking questions about, are you a millionaire? But, Lamb, I can open up my CRM and see one job, for 200K. So, I don't want to, I'm not, so one job, if you can land one job at 200K, right? Like, and then you replicate that process 6 times. You see what I'm saying? So don't be a skeptic, because the possibilities are endless, especially if it's somebody that really has the determination to get the job done. I promise you it's possible.
Absolutely. We got a couple of good questions jumping in the chat. I do want to get to, we did beginner, intermediate, pro. So Chris, let's talk a little bit about what's on the other end, what's on the highest end of, the parking lot striping game. If you wanted to max out on productivity, what does that look like?
I would get without question, I would get either a Titan. I don't know the name of it, but it's the next step from the Titan. I think it's like the 42 or something like that. It's a Titan 42 or the Graco 3900. To start pumping out those gigantic jobs, I would get the Graco 3900. You could get one right there. That's exactly the one that I would get right there. 14K. That's the one that I would get if I had to scale, right? Because once you get bigger machines, you can do more. Now we've got several machines, so I can send a guy out to go stripe, and he can take care of the machines and take care of the jobs and take care of everything that I need to take care of while I'm sleeping. And so, yeah, I would definitely get a Graco 3900. I'd get a couple of them, if you could. But if you can't, it's okay, because one will be more than sufficient. My friend Bill, who lives about 2 hours north, we're going to load up the equipment and go help him stripe a 7-story parking garage. And he's got a 3900, and he sold that job for over $30,000. So you think about that for a second. I mean, you know, one machine, and he called me and he said, "Hey, all we got is one machine. Would you mind helping us out?" And I said, "No problem. We'll load up the machines." And with that one machine that he's got, he's selling jobs. He's on a 7-story parking garage right now doing, you know, 30K. So keep that stuff in mind, that there are certain aspects, but all you need is the right training, the right mentorship, and you can get started and explode. And I really mean that.
Absolutely. Okay, now we'll kind of get into some questions. If you guys have questions, leave them in the comment section, and we'll go ahead and address those. Adrian Bowie says, what's the name of the site? We were looking at 2 sites. One was newstripe.com, and then the other one was Sherwin-Williams. So, like I said, me and Chris have a whole video on how to start a striping business for $0 at Sherwin-Williams. I'll probably leave that linked in the comment section so people can find it. Walada says, just now tuning in. Great idea. We appreciate it. We don't have a ton of questions. Walada did have a good question. Is it appropriate to ask how much you charge per restaurant? So, Chris, do you mind sharing anything with regards to pricing on restaurants?
Yeah, sure. No, it's a good question. It's a legitimate question. One of my favorite things about restaurants, I will say this before I just immediately get into the price. One of the great things about landing or acquiring a customer with multiple locations is the fact that you're able to give them a flat rate per location. Now, I mean, if it's got way more striping, of course, you wouldn't do that. But if you're able to, say, for example, lock them in at 20 restaurants times 600 a piece, right? So then, you know, that's a $12,000 customer, right? So we try to, with the Waffle Houses that we do, the price range can range anywhere between $650 to you know, just short of $1,400. And so, but the scooters that we're doing right now are $644, right? And it takes us just about an hour to do one scooters. So we have an entire list of them. So if it takes us about, if you can get about 4 or 5 scooters done in a night, I mean, 644 times, let's just say 5 to be conservative. I mean, in a night, you know, you're going to pull $3,200. I mean, and that's, you know, I don't know if you can see that, but that's just an example. I mean, every scooters that we do, it takes about an hour, and we charge just shy of $650. So you could go out there with one machine, make $3,000 a night, no problem.
Boom. And that's one of the beautiful pieces about, like Chris said, having restaurants. You have multiple of them. They are cheaper because you don't want to like if somebody has 30 restaurants, we're not going to charge them like a premium price as if it was just one parking lot. But the beautiful thing is you have a lot of them. You can space them out. Chris has a lot of flexibility about when he's actually going to do those. So it kind of works around his schedule in a way. And he's just able to charge, you know, a little bit less because he's doing a little bit more volume. So beautiful thing about restaurants. Now, there are huge jobs, as Chris mentioned. I think it was the parking garage that was $30,000, right, Chris? Yeah.
Yeah, so. it was 30K. And it's just the amount of money that you can make in such a short period of time. Like if you don't have good work ethic and you can't really get out there and grind it out, then, you know, but if you really have good work ethic, you get out there and grind it out. I mean, the possibilities are endless, but it's definitely not for lazy people. That's for sure. If you're lazy, don't try to start it.
There you go. Paul Google says, who trained you? Thoughts on buying used machines? Do you feel there are too many people? Okay, so let's do it first and foremost. Who trained you? Chris, I think you got out there in the beginning and you just kind of, you want to tell the origin story a little bit?
I can. Yeah, I can. There was a guy named James Cook. I had kind of got out there and did it for a while on my own, you know, and I didn't really have a good understanding. But you know, I went and got formal training from a guy named James out in Texas. And that's where I learned how to use machines. I learned more about paint. I learned how to seal coat. I mean, I got a personal mentor, and personal mentorship is very, very important. And I learned I learned the trade very precisely from somebody that trained me in person. Now, I had done some research and watched some videos and stuff like that, but there's nothing that is more beneficial than in-person training. And James, he's out in Troy, Texas. He gave me personal mentorship and really set me apart as far as infield productivity apart from anybody else.
Right. And so that's why now Chris is passing the torch and he's doing in-person training because he knows how valuable that was for his business. So if that's something that you guys are interested in, check out the second link in the comment section description. All you got to do is fill out the application form and we'll be in touch with you if, you kind of fit the bill. But Chris is doing in-person training now to help people get started, get going, and find the quickest way to success with regards to their striping business. Thoughts on buying used machines, Chris? You want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. Used machines, you have to be very careful on buying used machines because you could get a bunk sale. I mean, a friend of mine, of course, we've got a community of stripers. I mean, we have the private Discord group chat community that we also have access to. It's the personal group mentorship that we have people that come in there all the time to learn from us and to gain better wisdom, insight, instruction, so on and so forth. And used machines can be a curse, but they can also be very beneficial. For example, my friend Mario from Tampa, Florida, who runs Radiant, he was out there and he got a used machine from somebody. He spent $3,000 on a machine and he loaded up paint in it and it didn't spray. He had to rebuild the pump. He had to rebuild the pistons. I mean, he basically had to buy a machine and then completely rebuild it, right? So if you're going to buy a used machine, and we teach much more about this in the How to Stripe course, but if you're going to buy a used machine, you need to make sure that you're able to spray paint through it. Do not buy a machine from someone that is not willing to let you spray paint through it. And fan patterns, I mean, all that stuff matters. How wide the tip is, how wide the fan pattern is, how consistent it is. Does the pump lose pressure? Does it regain pressure? I mean, there's a lot of things that you need to take into consideration, but one of the most important things that I can tell you now, because we can spend the next hour just talking about that, but one of the most important things that I can tell you right now is make sure that you are able to spray paint through the line striper if you're going to go the used route.
Absolutely. I mean, that's probably the most important piece of the parking lot striping machine, right, Chris? Okay, Paul's last question that he had, he loaded us up with 3 here. Do you feel that there are too many people trying to get into the space? Race to the bottom for pricing. Is it okay if I answer this one first, Chris?
Oh, perfect. Go ahead.
Like we kind of spoke about this in the beginning of the call, and essentially what it is there's people that have kind of gatekeep the industry in a way because they make the contacts. Those are the ones who do all of the work for a majority of the companies. There's an 80-20 principle that states that 20% of the companies do 80% of the business. I don't think that parking lot striping is oversaturated at all, but I mentioned this in a previous video. If you're one of these people who's trying to find an undersaturated business or a business that's perfectly saturated, you're never going to find it because you're always going to make an excuse of why it'll never work. So a couple things. First and foremost, if you know how to get jobs like the big guys, then you'll never be without work. And then secondly, no business is perfect. You're never going to find a perfect level of saturation that you're like, okay, yeah, this is a good business. Let me get into it. So that's my thoughts, Chris.
Yeah. And I'd like to add something in too. This is what's unique because in the How to Stripe training, we talk about striping, we talk about field work, operations, so on and so forth. But one of the things that is specifically unique to the training is we also teach you guys how to get customers, the ebook marketing, right? There are things that we teach within How to Stripe that no competitor in my area is utilizing, right? And if they are utilizing, they got it from me, right? So you can implement tactics that other people are not doing, which will allow you to dominate within the marketplace, right? So think about that with me for a second. Let me take you on a journey. If you implement what other people are not doing within the marketplace and you do what they're not doing, you're able to essentially capitalize on something that your competitors are not doing. For example, none of my competitors, unless they have specifically purchased How to Stripe, are utilizing our ebook system. That is specifically original to How to Stripe. And only people who have access to the How to Stripe training have access to those materials, and no one else is using that. Okay. Then we also talk about how to properly optimize a GMB profile listing. This is something that is absolutely vital as it pertains to this information. You have to be able to acquire customers. Okay, does that make sense? You have to be able to acquire customers in a profitable fashion.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Chris. So if you guys haven't already, be sure to check out How to Stripe It over the first link in the comment section description. In-person training, second link in the comment section description if you guys want to come out and meet with Chris. We want to give a big shout out to Walada. Hopefully I didn't butcher that too bad. Walada, thank you so much. $20 super chat. She says, thank you. Great channel, great content. Thank you as well, Chris. This is life-changing information. We really appreciate that, Walada, because obviously we put a lot of time, energy, and effort into the channel. Try to provide you guys with the best value possible with regards to, information around industries. Because I know the funny thing is, Chris, are you still with us? It looks like you froze a little bit on my end.
I'm here. I think I'm frozen. Can you hear me?
Okay, Chris is frozen. Funny story for you guys, though. We'll give Chris a little time to thaw out. A funny story for you guys. Whenever I started my business, not whenever I started my business, I was making YouTube content on the internet, kind of sharing what was going on with my business. And Chris actually found that. And that's one of the reasons why Chris actually jumped in, started a striping business. And Chris has been super successful since then. But, if it wasn't for people sharing information and kind of, telling their story and their successes that they're having, we wouldn't inspire other people. And I think the world is a better place because of it. Wouldn't you say so, Chris?
Yeah, for sure. 100%. Do I need to log out and come back in to get back on the stream?
Yeah, maybe pop out and pop back in so that way we can try to fix it. Okay, Chris is going to bounce for a minute. I think we have one more question. If anybody else is in the chat right now and you guys have questions, please leave them down below in the comment section so that way we can get to them before we wrap. Like I said, Walada, we really appreciate you for hanging out, and we really appreciate you for the super chat as well. I try to help as many people out as possible. We don't get as many super chats as you might think, but people always message me and be like, dude, because of you, I'm making like $100K a year, or I quit my job and I started my own business, or, whatever the case may be, which is, why we do it in the first place. So I greatly appreciate that, Walada. It means a ton to me. Let's see if there's anything else in here that we want to touch on. Great channel, great information. Really appreciate it. Our 2 cent podcast. We'll give Chris another minute to jump back in. All right, let's see. We had another question here. What's it like in the beginning? How do you get bigger jobs and get your name out there? So Chris was kind of alluding to that previously about some of the information that's in the How to Stripe course. I'll give you guys a huge tip right here. A lot of it's Google My Business. You have to think from the perspective of the person that's going to be hiring you, right? How do they make purchasing decisions? Typically what they'll do is they'll Google a service provider. They'll Google parking lot striping. And what do? They pick the service provider that ranks number 1 and that has the most reviews. And so if that's how people are making purchasing decisions, then that's going to be how, we're ultimately able to get in front of them. So we need to figure out how to get our GMB listing, how to rank high, and all the factors that go in between that. And if we're able to rank higher than everybody else, then we're going to be the ones getting the call. Obviously, there's other things that go into it other than that. When Chris hops back on, I'm going to let him share his origin story. He did shoot me a text. Do I log out and come back in? I apologize, guys. We're trying to work through some technical difficulties here. But essentially, that's it, right? How are these big companies making these decisions on who's going to be coming to service the property, and how do we ultimately backwards engineer that to get in front of them? Chris has a very interesting thing that he did early on in his company and how he got his first couple of jobs. So I'm going to let him share that. Well, he was back in. Now he's not back in. So we'll give him another second. It's really hard to run an interview whenever the guest keeps bouncing. So I'm trying to, you guys just bear with me. In this video, though, if you made it till the end, or if you're just jumping in the live, we covered beginner equipment setups, intermediate, and pro. We covered the pricing for each. We covered how much work you can get done with all of those things. And so, yes, we got our 2 cents podcast. All right, Chris is hopping back in. All right. So Chris is back in. So Chris, a question that I just tried to answer for SuperCon here was, what's it like in the beginning? How do you get bigger jobs and get your name out there? So I kind of broke down the basics, right? How are these big companies making these purchasing decisions? How do we backwards engineer that? But if you can, Chris, before we wrap, just tell the origin story of how you got started and how you did a little work for free in order to kind of leverage some more work down the road.
Sure. Well, what I did is I did it completely opposite of how people, I guess, traditionally view business.
A lot of people, whenever they first get started in their business, of course, everyone starts a business to generate money, financial independency, so on and so forth. Of course, which was my motive as well. But what I did in the very, very beginning was I continued to work my job. I built my business on the side, and I positioned myself as a reputable company in the community that wanted to make a difference and an impact. I would go to mom and pop stores. I would go to high schools. I would go to schools that I went to, right, in time past, and I would do work for them for low cost or for even for free. Because then I built our reputation as a company in a short period of time. What it did was it had a positive reaction. For example, just think about like Jeff Bezos, for example. And I'm not any way comparing myself to him or his stature, but his methodology, right? So when he first wrote his blueprint for Amazon, whenever he got all his investors on board, what Bezos did is he informed his investors that this was going to be an endeavor that was going to take some time to generate income. I don't think Amazon was profitable till they had been in business for like 5+ years. So they just ran even, but they built the brand and the reputation. So I thought from the same general concept, like instead of just being focused on profit, I thought, okay, how can I build a brand, leverage the brand that I'm building for consistent sustainability within the marketplace? That's the difference between me and then other people that start businesses is we weren't focus driven on profitability in the very beginning. We were focused on building a sustainable brand that people would recognize. Okay. So now when they deal with me, they're constantly being pumped with value. They're constantly getting pumped with value, with information, with a good price, with a reputable company. And we built a sustainable brand. And that's the difference, right? Like, guys, you can go out and start this and there's no reason why you won't be successful. But he talked about oversaturation, but there's a difference between someone who's just focused, driven on profit, and then someone who's focused, driven on profit, customer service, sustainability, reputation, customer relations. I mean, all these things are important. So in the very beginning stages, I implemented several ways on how to get customers. We teach all that, how to strive, but you essentially, the blueprint is you have to build a brand. Okay. I know people that did 100K their first year, their second year they did 60K. Well, why didn't they do 60K and then do 100K the very next year, and then 200K, then 250, then 300, then 500? Like it should never go backwards. There should be a forward progression. If you have a sustainable brand, you're going to get customers every time without question.
Well, build your brand, and yeah, that's essentially it. So let's wrap on this, Chris, because I think we handled everything with regards to the Q&A. We talked a bunch about the equipment and everything else. For anybody who made it this far in the video, what should the word of the day be?
Get started.
Get started. If you made this far in the video, comment down below, get started. We will hashtag you a real one. We appreciate you guys for hanging out. Be sure to hit the thumbs up button for us. Subscribe to the channel for us. If you haven't already, check out the How to Stripe course. It'll be the first link in the comment section description. Over 8 hours of training, pro tips, how to price jobs, lead generation. We go through it all in this course. It's the most concise, put together training with regards to how to start your parking lot striping business. The other thing as well is if you're somebody who wants to actually train with Chris in person, if you want to hold the striping machine, if you want to push it, if you want to put the paint down, if you want to be on site with him as he's quoting these properties, be sure to check out the second link in the comment section description and fill out the form for training. But without further ado, my name is Justin, Forever Self-Employed. Until next time, hustle hard and get that money, baby. Peace.